It's time for spelling analysis, and the first word is century. A century equals 100 years. Go ahead and say century. How many syllables? 3. Now, century has a sound that assimilates in it. So we will say to spell cen-tu-ry. What will we say to spell? Cen-tu-ry. Let's sound it out. Sen, s, use a k, s, a, n, tu, t, u, ri, e, use a y, I, e. Go ahead and write sen, tu, ri, sounding it out as you write it. And now help me to write it. The first syllable is sen, s, a, n, tu, t, u, ri, e. How will we mark it? We'll put a line over the u. A, E, O, U usually say their long sounds at the end of the syllable. And we'll put a 4 over the y, I, e, saying its fourth sound. And notice y is saying its fourth sound, e, at the end of a multi-syllable word in an unstressed syllable. But let's talk about this part that's assimilating. Let's begin by sounding this out carefully. S, a, n, t, u, e. Century. Now let's say century a little faster. Century. Century. Do you notice these sounds begin to assimilate to century? Chur. That's that assimilation that we learned about in the lesson. So say to spell will help us to break those sounds apart. Let's do our next word. The next word is centennial. The university will have a centennial celebration. Go ahead and say centennial. How many syllables? 4. We will say to spell cen-ten-ni-al. What will we say to spell? Cen-ten-ni-al. Let's sound it out. Sen. S. Use a k, s, a, n, ten, t, a, n, ni, n, e. Use a I, e, ya. All. Aw. This is a, all. Go ahead and write cen-ten-ni-al, sounding it out as you write it. And help me to write it. Sen, s, a, n, ten, t, a, n, ni, n, e, all. How do we mark it? Well, I, e, ya is saying its third sound. And here I use say to spell all to help myself remember that it's an a, saying its broad sound before an L. Now let's look at the word centennial and compare it to century. What does a centennial celebration mean? Well, it's the 100-year celebration. And there's 100 years in a century. That's because cent, spelled like this, means 100. So when we spelled century, someone understood that cent means 100. And even though the sound is assimilating, the relationship in meaning was retained with these morphemes because cent means 100. Let's try another word. The next word is percent. 10% of the proceeds will be donated. Go ahead and say percent. How many syllables? 2. We will say to spell per cent. What will we say to spell? Per cent. Let's sound it out. Per, p, use the of her. Cent, s, use a k, s, a, n, t. Go ahead and write per cent, sounding it out as you write it. And now help me to write it. Per, p, cent, s, a, n, t. How do we mark it? We'll underline the and what sound of k, s do we hear? The second. And why is it saying its second sound? Because C always softens to S when followed by an E, I, or Y. And I just saw a mistake in these two words. Do you see it? Well, I didn't mark the C softening to S in these words. I was too excited to talk about the morphemes, so I missed it. In percent, how is this word similar to centennial and century? Excellent. You have cent again. And a percent is a part of 100. So there you go. There's the meaning of percent right in the morphemes. Let's read it. P-er-s-e-n-t, percent. The next word is centimeter. The square is 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. Go ahead and say centimeter. How many syllables? 4. We will say to spell centimeter. What will we say to spell? Centimeter. Let's sound it out. Sen. S. Use a k. S. E. N. T. T. I. Use an I. I. E. Ya. Me. M. E. Ter. T. Use the of her. Go ahead and write centimeter, sounding it out as you write it. And help me to write it. Sen, s, e, n, t, t, I, me, m, e, ter, t, And how will we mark it? Well, C is softening to S before an E, I, or Y. How about T? I and Y may say I or I at the end of the syllable, so there's no marking here. We'll put a line over the E and we'll underline the Let's read it. S, E, N, T, I, M, E, T, centimeter. I see cent again. What does this mean within the context of the word centimeter? Well, there are 100 centimeters in a meter. So there it is again. We have these morphemes clearly demonstrating the meaning of the word. The next word is disaster. The hurricane left a disaster in its wake. Go ahead and say disaster. How many syllables? 3. We will say to spell disaster. What will we say to spell? Disaster. Let's sound it out. The first syllable is di. I. Use an I, I, E, ya. Zas. Z. Use a s, z. As. Ter. T. Use the of her. So go ahead and write disaster, sounding it out as you write it. And help me to write it. The first syllable is di. D, I, zas, z, as, ter, t, And how do we mark it? Well, this is saying its second sound, z, di, zas, and then ter. We'll underline the Let's read it. D, I, z, as, t, disaster. Did you know this word's commonly on commonly misspelled word lists? But it makes perfect sense once you see it. Disaster, disaster. The next word is adventure. Let's go on an adventure. How many syllables? 3. We will say to spell adventure. What will we say to spell? Adventure. Let's sound it out. Ad. Ven. V-e-n. Tuer. T-u-er. Silent finally. Go ahead and write adventure, sounding it out as you write it. And help me to write it. Adventure. T-u-er. Silent finally. How do we mark it? We'll put a line over the U and underline the E. Why do we have a silent final E in adventure? The vowel said its long sound because of the E. Now let's sound out this word carefully and then say it faster and faster and see what happens. Adventure. Adventure. That's a little hard to say, but let's say it faster. Adventure, adventure. Do you hear it? These sounds assimilate to chur, adventure. Excellent. The next word is fierce. The competition was fierce. Go ahead and say fierce. How many syllables? One. We will say to spell fierce. Oh, let's go ahead and spell fierce. E, use the E of field. S, use a k, s. Silent final E. Go ahead and write fierce, sounding it out as you write it. And help me to write it. Fierce. E, s. Silent final E. How do we mark it? We'll underline the E and we'll put a 2 over the k. Why did it say its second sound? Well, because of the E. The C softened to S because of the E. S. Fierce. Great work. The next word is science. Science class will begin at 10. Go ahead and say science. How many syllables? 2. We will say to spell science. What will we say to spell? Science. Let's sound it out. Sigh. S. Use the advanced phonogram SC. I. Use an I, ya. Ence. S. This is a k, s. Silent final E. Go ahead and write science, sounding it out as you write it. And help me to write it. Sci, s, I, ence, s. Silent final E. How will we mark it? We'll underline the s. We'll put a line over the I. Why did it say its long sound? I and Y may say I or I at the end of the syllable. Why is this saying its second sound? K, s, science. That's right. The C softened to S because of the E. Let's read it. S, science. Excellent. The next word is collide. The cars are about to collide. Go ahead and say collide. How many syllables? 2. We will say to spell call, lied. What will we say to spell? Call, lied. Let's sound it out. Call, k. Use a k, s. Aw, ul. Lied, ul, I, d. Silent final E. This is an I, E, ya. Go ahead and write call, lied, sounding it out as you write it. And help me to write it. The first syllable is call, k, ah, ul, and then lied, ul, I, d. Silent final E. And how will we mark it? We'll put a line over the I and we'll double underline the silent final E. Why do we have a silent final E in collide? The vowel said its long sound because of the E. Let's read it. K, ah, ul, I, d. Collide. It's interesting, this word, because lied means to strike. And then call is that prefix com or con or call that assimilates with this first sound here, which means with or together. So when things collide, they strike together. The next word is collision. The bike just barely avoided a collision with the car. Go ahead and say collision. How many syllables? 3. We will say to spell call, li, Jean. What will we say to spell? Call, li, Jean. The first syllable is call. Let's sound it out. K. Use a k, s, a, ul. Li, ul, I. Use an I, E, ya. Jean. J. You got it? N. Go ahead and write call, li, Jean, sounding it out as you write it. And help me to write it. The first syllable is call, k, a, ul, li, ul, I. Jean. J, A, N. How will we mark it? Well, we'll put a line over the sh, zh. And what sound is it saying? It's saying its second sound, its voice sound. Zh. Let's read it. K, a, o, e, zh, a, n. Collision. How are collide and collision related? You're right. Collision is two things that are colliding. So it's with or together colliding. But why do we use a sh here? That's right. Collide, d is a voice sound. So it changes into that Latin spelling zh, which is also voiced. Collision. Do you see it? Those are pretty neat words. The next word is unusual. That is an unusual color. Go ahead and say unusual. How many syllables? 4. We will say to spell on, you, zu, all. This one's a little tricky because we have some assimilation in it. On, you, zu, at, all. Unusual. All right, how will we, let's sound it out together. The first syllable is un, n, you, zu, z, use a s, z, you, all, use an a, all. Un, you, zu, all. I think you can do it. Go ahead and sounding it out as you write it, and then we'll talk about this one. Un, you, zu, all. All right, let's sound it out together. Un, n, you, zu, z, you, all, ol. Now, how will we mark this? We'll put a line over the u, on, you, and we hear that in the word. Zu, we'll put a 2 over the z, and then we have the u. All, we'll put 2 dots over the a. It's saying it's broad sound. So let's read it very carefully. N, u, z, u, ol. Unusual. That's hard to say. What happens if I say it faster and faster? Unusual, unusual. Do you hear that? This begins to assimilate to unusual. Do you hear it? It assimilates into ju, a voice sound. That's why I put a z as the voice sound here. So this is again a word that assimilates. The next word is lunge. The player made a lunge for the ball. Lunge. Go ahead and say lunge. Let's sound it out. J. Use a g, j. Silent final e. Go ahead and write lunge. And help me to write it. J. Silent final e. How do we mark it? We'll put a 2 over the g, j, because it's saying its second sound, and we'll double underline the silent e. Why do we have a silent final e in lunge? The G softened to j because of the e. Let's read it. Lunge. Lunge. Excellent. The next word is dangle. Please do not dangle over the edge. As a Minnesotan, this one is tricky for me to say, but dangle. All right, we will say to spell dangle. What will we say to spell? Dangle. Let's sound it out. D-a-n, gull, g-ul, silent final e. Go ahead and write dangle. And help me to write it. The first syllable is dan, d-a-n, gull, g-ul, silent final e. How will we mark it? Well, double underline the silent e. Why do I have a silent final e in dangle? That's right, every syllable must have a vowel. Let's read it. D-a-n-g-ul, dangle. Now, in my dialect in Minnesota, we say dangle. Sometimes we put in extra long vowel sounds. So that one's a little tricky for me to say. The next word is Combination. Iced tea and lemonade are a great combination. How many syllables? Oh, go ahead and say combination. How many syllables? 4. We will say to spell combination. What will we say to spell? Combination. Let's sound it out. The first syllable is com. K. Use a k. S. A, b, I. Use an I, E, ya. Nay, n, a, shan. Sh. Use a tall sh. A, n. Go ahead and write combination, sounding it out as you write it. Excellent. Let's write it together. Com. K, a, b, I. Nay, n, a, shan. Sh, a, n. How will we mark it? We'll put a line over the A. Why? It said its long sound. A, E, O, U usually say their long sounds at the end of the syllable, and we'll underline the sh. Let's read it. K, a, b, I, n, a, sh, a, n. Combination. Excellent. The last word is serious. This is serious. Go ahead and say serious. How many syllables? 3. We will say to spell serious. What will we say to spell? Serious. Let's sound it out. C. S. Use a s, z, e. E. Use an I, E, ya. Us. Ow, o, u, s. Use a s, z. Go ahead and write serious, sounding it out as you write it. And help me to write it. C, S, E, re, e, us. Us. How will we mark it? Put a line over the E. A, E, O, U usually say their long sounds at the end of the syllable. We'll put a 3 over the I. Notice, I, E, ya is saying that second long sound also at the end of the syllable. We'll underline the and put a 4 over it. Let's read it. S, E, s. Serious. Great work. I think this is one of my favorite lists. It was really fun to see assimilation in these words and some of the morphemes and how these come together to show the meaning of the words as well.
Combining the science of reading with the joy of learning. Learn more at essentials.logicoфenglish.com.